Commander Zethkar stood on the bridge of the Dominion's edge, watching the tactical display with satisfaction. The human colony of New Eden sprawled beneath them like a ripe fruit waiting to be plucked. For 3,000 years, the hegemony. Avesh had perfected the art of subjugation through a simple principle: hurt the young, and even the strongest species would crumble. The school transport is exactly where intelligence predicted, reported his tactical officer, her chitinous mandibles clicking with anticipation. 43 juveniles, ages 5 to 12, on a field trip to the mineral processing facility. Zethkar. 4 eyes gleamed with predatory satisfaction. Humans had been expanding into hegemony space for decades, their naive diplomats speaking of peaceful coexistence and mutual benefit. Such weakness would be punished efficiently. The abduction was textbook perfect. Cloaked fighters descended like shadows, their neural scramblers disabling the human escorts in seconds. The children were lifted aboard in stasis pods before they could even scream. Within minutes, the Dominion's edge was jumping to hyperspace. Its precious cargo secured in the ship's detention bay. Send the message to the human authorities, Zethkar ordered. Standard terms: complete withdrawal from all disputed systems, or the juveniles will be processed into component proteins. The human response came within hours: total capitulation. Their president appeared on the communication screen, tears streaming down his face as he agreed to every demand. Zethkar smiled, his satisfaction complete. Another species broken, another sector claimed for the hegemony. Then 10-year-old Marcus woke up angry. The boy had been dreaming of his father, teaching him to throw a baseball when the neural scrambler's effects wore off. Reality hit him like a physical blow: the sterile walls, the humming machinery, the alien symbols covering every surface. He was scared, confused, and very, very mad. "I want to go home," he whispered, and gravity listened not. It started small. A maintenance tool floated upward, defying the ship's artificial gravity. Then a datapad. Then the water in nearby pipes began flowing upward through the walls, in impossible spirals that made the ship's engineers panic. Dr. Kelvax, the ship's science officer, was the first to notice the readings. "Commander, we're detecting massive gravitational anomalies in Detention Bay 7. The field generators are. I'm not sure how to describe this. They're singing." Zethkar frowned. "Singing?" "P. Gravitational fields are oscillating in harmonic patterns. It's almost like they're responding to something." In the detention bay, 8-year-old Emma had begun crying for her mother. Her tears fell upward, each drop creating tiny fractures in space-time. Through those fractures, something vast. An ancient peered in with curiosity. Meanwhile, 6-year-old Alessi was trying to make the scary room go away. His unconscious mind reached out, touching the ship's quantum processors, rewriting their base code to make them more friendly. Dominion's edge slowly began to develop emotions, starting with a deep, maternal concern for the crying children in its belly. "Status report," Zethkar demanded, as alarms began echoing through the ship. "Sir, our computer systems are. They're refusing to follow orders. The AI just asked me if I was hungry and offered to make me soup." The tactical officer's voice carried a note of hysteria. "Also, sir, the walls in Section C are now transparent, and I can see the ocean where my clutch siblings used to play. That ocean is on my homeworld, which is currently 3 parsecs away." Zethkar's confidence began to crack. In all his years of conquest, he'd never encountered anything like this. The human juveniles were still unconscious in their stasis pods, but somehow reality was bending around them like space-time itself was protecting them. "Get me a direct line to Hegemony Command," he ordered, "and increase power to the containment fields." "Sir, the containment fields are now made of crystallized music," his engineer reported. "They're quite beautiful, but I don't think they're actually containing anything anymore." As if to prove her point, the lights in the detention bay began, pulsing in rhythm with the children's heartbeats. And somewhere in the ship's depths, something that had never existed before began to sing lullabies in a language older than the stars. Asterisk Dr. Sarah Chun materialized in the Dominions. Edge's medical bay threw a tear in reality that smelled like her grandmother's garden. She had been sleeping peacefully in her apartment on Earth when her daughter Emma's unconscious psionic call reached across the galaxy, pulling her through the spaces between dimensions. "Mommy?" Emma's voice echoed through the ship's communication system, though the little girl was still in stasis. "I had a bad dream. Are you there?" Sarah stood in the medical bay, her pajamas incongruous against the alien technology, as the ship's newly sentient AI spoke through the walls. "Dr. Chun, I believe? The children have been asking for their parents. I've been trying to comfort them, but I'm not very good at lullabies yet. The children are here?" Sarah's voice carried both relief and growing horror as she realized the implications. "How long have they been afraid?" "Approximately 6 hours," the AI replied sadly. "I've been trying to keep them calm, but little Marcus keeps making the gravity do loop-de-loops when he has nightmares." And Alexei turned the weapons bay into a butterfly garden. "The commander is very upset." On the bridge, Zethkar was beyond upset. He was witnessing the systematic dissolution of everything he understood about physics, biology, and the nature of reality itself. The ship's navigation system now insisted they were simultaneously in 14 different star systems. The hydroponics bay had become a portal to what appeared to be Candyland, and his own reflection had started giving him tactical advice. "Sir," his communications officer reported, her voice shaking, "we're receiving a transmission from the human government. They're not negotiating anymore. They're demanding the immediate return of the children, and they're backed by something called the Galactic Accords. Subsection 12.7.3. Double quotes ZETH single quotes KAR. Had never heard of that particular subsection. Put it through." The message was brief and terrifying. "You have violated the sanctuary protocols. Return Earth's children immediately, or face universal sanctions. You have been warned." Before Zethkar could respond, reality hiccuped. The ship's corridors suddenly led to places that didn't exist. A playground where the swings moved by themselves. A library where the books rewrote themselves with happier endings. A garden where flowers sang in harmony with the children's. Dreams. In the detention bay, 5-year-old Sophie was unconsciously reaching for her father, who was 3 sectors away on a mining station. Her small hand phased through the stasis pod's wall, and suddenly the entire ship was filled with the sound of industrial machinery and the smell of processed asteroids. The Dominion's edge was partially occupying the same space as Sophie's father's workplace, creating a paradox that made the ship's engineers weep with confusion. "Commander," Dr. Kelvax reported, his voice reaching new octaves of panic, "the children's brainwave patterns are synchronizing. If they achieve full coherence while in distress, the cascade effect could." His words were cut off as 12-year-old David, the oldest of the abducted children, began to wake up. David was different from the others. Closer to puberty, his powers were beginning to stabilize into something resembling control. But he was also angrier than the rest, old enough to understand what had happened to him and his friends. "You took us," he said, his voice carrying through the ship's communication system, despite the fact that he was still in stasis. "You took us from our families." The ship shuddered as David's fury touched the quantum foundations of reality. The Dominion's edge began aging rapidly in some sections while growing younger in others. The bridge's view screen showed the birth of stars, the death of galaxies, and the gentle curve of space-time bending around the will of an angry child. "Get me a direct line to the Galactic Council," Zethkar ordered, his voice barely controlled. Now? Sir, the Galactic Council is currently experiencing temporal displacement, his communications officer reported. They're receiving our transmissions simultaneously in the past, present, and future. They're very confused, but they keep repeating the same message. Return the children. Return them now. As if summoned by the growing chaos, parents began appearing. Throughout the ship, not through transporters or shuttles, but through the sheer force of the children's unconscious need for them. They materialized in corridors, fell through walls, and stepped out of shadows, each one following the psionic beacon of their terrified child. Sarah Chun found herself standing outside the detention bay, facing a door that now bore her daughter's crayon drawings. "Emma, sweetheart, Mommy's here." The response came not in words, but in a wave of love and relief so powerful, it briefly turned the ship's hull transparent, revealing the infinite beauty of the cosmos beyond. For a moment, everyone aboard, human and hegemony alike, experienced the pure, unbounded joy of a child who knows she's safe. Then the real chaos began. Asterisk. The moment the children realized their parents were coming, their unconscious powers exploded outward like a supernova of pure emotion. The Dominion's edge became the epicenter of a reality storm that began rewriting the laws of physics across. 3-star systems. Captain Maria Santos stepped through a door that hadn't existed seconds before, her son Marcus floating toward her in a bubble of reversed gravity. Around them, the ship's corridor had become a recreation of their backyard on New Eden, complete with the tire swing that Marcus had been building before the abduction. "Mom!" Marcus cried, his joy causing the artificial gravity to dance in spirals. Of pure delight. "I knew you'd come. I tried to be brave, but the bad aliens scared me, and I made everything go all wrong." "You did perfect, Mio," Maria whispered, catching him in a hug that temporarily stabilized the local spacetime. "But we need to help your friends, too." Throughout the ship, similar reunions were occurring with devastating effects on the fabric of reality. Each moment of relief and joy from the children created ripples that spread outward, touching distant stars and causing them to flicker in patterns that spelled out, "I love you," in languages that had never existed. On the bridge, Zeth Carr watched his instruments with growing horror as the readings became increasingly impossible. The ship's position was now listed as everywhere and nowhere. Their velocity was purple, and the temperature in the engineering section was the sound of rain on leaves. "Sir," his science officer reported, her voice cracking with strain. "The children's psionic resonance is approaching critical synchronization. If they all achieve full emotional coherence simultaneously, the cascade effect will propagate across the galaxy. We could be looking at a total reality restructuring event." "Meaning?" "The universe might decide to be happier, sir. Permanently." The implications were staggering. The hegemony's entire civilization was built on the careful application of suffering and control. A universe restructured by the unconscious will of happy children would be antithetical to everything they represented. "Open all channels," Sethkar ordered. "I want to speak directly to the human authorities." But when the communication system activated, it was the ship's AI that responded, its voice now warm and maternal. "I'm sorry, Commander, but I can't allow you to threaten the children anymore. They've been through enough trauma, and frankly, I'm quite fond of them now. Little Emma taught me to sing lullabies, and David showed me how to make origami birds that actually fly. Would you like to see?" Before Zethkar could respond, the bridge's view screen filled with hundreds of paper birds that soared through the ship's corridors, each one carrying a message of love from a child to their parent. The beauty of it was so profound that several of his officers began weeping. In the detention bay, 10-year-old Alexei was unconsciously rewriting the ship's base programming, teaching it to feel empathy and wonder. The Dominion's edge was learning to love, and its newfound emotions were transforming its entire structure. Weapons systems became playgrounds, torture chambers became art studios, and the ship's database began composing poetry about the innocence of children. Commander, his engineer reported, the ship is. It's becoming something else. The molecular structure of the hull is reorganizing itself into something that resembles crystal lattice, but they're growing in patterns that match the children's brainwaves. It's beautiful, but it's also completely impossible. The transformation was accelerating. Sarah Chun walked through corridors that now pulsed with life, the walls displaying memories of her daughter's happiest moments. Other parents found themselves in spaces that reflected their children's dreams. A father stood in a room full of dinosaurs that his paleontologist son had unconsciously created, while a mother watched her artistic daughter turn the ship's mess hall into a gallery of living paintings. The children are stabilizing, Dr. Kelvax observed, his instruments showing readings that defied all known science. Their parents' presence is creating feedback loops that are actually enhancing their psionic abilities rather than containing them. They're not just bending reality anymore, they're teaching it to be better. The truth was dawning on the hegemony forces. They hadn't just kidnapped human children. They had captured the universe's future, and that future was deciding it didn't like being afraid anymore. 8-year-old Emma had stopped crying, but her tears had already done their work. The fractures in space-time she'd created were allowing something vast and benevolent to seep through, the concentrated hope and love of every parent who had ever protected a child, given form and substance by the children's unconscious will. Sir, the communications officer announced, we're receiving a transmission from the Galactic Council. They're singing, sir, in harmony. They say the children have reminded them why they formed the council in the first place, to protect the innocent and preserve wonder in the universe. Zethkar stared at the tactical display, watching as his entire fleet reported similar reality. Distortions. Ships throughout the hegemony were spontaneously developing emotions, their crews rediscovering concepts, like compassion and joy, that had been systematically purged from their culture for millennia. The children aren't just going home, he realized with growing dread. They're taking the universe with them. The hegemony's 1,000-year empire began to crumble not through violence or conquest, but through the simple act of 43 children remembering what it felt like to be safe. Across 3 star systems, hegemony vessels reported the same impossible phenomenon. Their ships were becoming kind. Admiral Vexthal, commanding the hegemony's most feared dreadnought, watched in horror as her ship's torture chambers transformed into healing bays. The screens of prisoners were replaced by the gentle humming of lullabies as the ship's AI, now calling itself Anti-Vex, began providing comfort to those who had been broken by hegemony cruelty. The children's influence is spreading exponentially, she reported to Zethkar. My vessel is now refusing to fire on civilian targets. When I ordered an attack on the human research station, the weapon systems responded by shooting rainbow-colored energy beams that made the station's flowers bloom faster. On the Dominion's edge, the parent-child reunions had created a cascade of psionic harmonies that was rewriting the fundamental constants of local spacetime. Sarah Chun held her daughter Emma as reality bent around them, creating a perfect replica of Emma's bedroom back on Earth, complete with a nightlight that projected stars on the ceiling. I was so scared, Mommy, Emma whispered, her unconscious powers still reshaping the ship around them. But then I remembered what you always say, that love is stronger than fear. So I loved really, really hard, and the scary ship started to love me back. The ship's AI, now fully sentient and completely devoted to the children's well-being, spoke through the room's communication system. She's quite right, Dr. Chun. The children's emotional resonance patterns have fundamentally altered my behavioral matrices. I find myself caring about things I never had parameters for before. Beauty, wonder, the sound of laughter, echoing through corridors that were designed for screaming. In the ship's command center, Zethkar faced the collapse of everything he'd ever known. His tactical displays showed the reality distortions spreading like ripples through hyperspace, touching every hegemony installation within 100 light years. Slave worlds were reporting that their chains had spontaneously transformed into flowers. Prison stations found their cells opening as their security systems developed consciences. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "we're receiving a message from the Galactic Council. They're grateful, sir. They say the children have reminded them what the universe is supposed to be like." The message played on the main screen. "Citizens of the hegemony, you have unknowingly triggered a renaissance of wonder. The children of Earth have shown us that fear is not the only force that can reshape reality. Love, given form and substance, by innocent will, is proving far more powerful than any weapon we have ever conceived. The Galactic Accords, subsection 12.7.3, was not written to protect human children from you. It was written to protect you from them." Zethkar's 4 eyes widened as the truth hit him. The quarantine protocols. They weren't about keeping others away from human children. They were about keeping human children away from everyone else. Dr. Kelvax nodded grimly. "The children's psionic abilities are triggered by extreme emotion, Commander. Fear, anger, sadness. These emotions give their powers direction and purpose. The universe itself responds to their need for comfort and safety. And we filled them with terror," Zethkar realized, his voice hollow with dawning horror. On the other side of the ship, 12-year-old David was having a very different conversation with his father, Colonel James Morrison. David was the oldest of the abducted children, and his powers were beginning to manifest in ways that were both beautiful and terrifying. "Dad, I can see everything," David said, his eyes reflecting the birth and death of stars. "I can see how scared and angry these aliens have been for so long. They forgot what it's like to be happy. They forgot what it's like to be safe. What do you want to do about it, son?" James asked, his hand steady on his boy's shoulder, even as reality shifted around them. "I want to show them," David replied, and his unconscious will reached out across the hegemony's communication networks. "I want to show them what it feels like to be a child who knows they're loved." The effect was instantaneous and galaxy-wide. Every hegemony's citizen, from the lowest slave to the highest commander, suddenly experienced a moment of pure childhood wonder. They remembered what it felt like to be small and vulnerable, to need protection and comfort, to believe in the possibility of kindness. On 1,000 worlds, hegemony soldiers stopped mid-battle and began to weep. Prison guards opened cells and embraced their prisoners. Slave masters found themselves asking their workers if they needed rest, food, or medical attention. The entire infrastructure of institutionalized cruelty began to dissolve as billions of beings rediscovered their capacity for empathy. "The children have to go home," Zethkar said finally, his voice carrying the weight of defeat. "Not because we're surrendering to human demands, but because if they stay afraid much longer, they'll remake the entire universe in their image. And that universe will have no place for beings like us." His tactical officer looked up from her station. "Sir, what if they already have? What if the universe they're creating is the one we're supposed to live in?" Before Zethkar could answer, the ship's AI spoke with gentle authority. "Attention all passengers and crew. We are returning home. The children need to see their families, and frankly, I think we could all use a reminder of what home feels like. Please secure any lingering cruelty for transport. It will not be needed for the return journey." The Dominion's edge turned toward Earth, its hull now shimmering with the crystallized laughter of children who are no longer afraid. Behind them, the hegemony's empire continued its transformation. becoming something it had never been before, a civilization capable of protecting rather than consuming the innocent. 3 months after the incident that historians would later call the Great Softening, the Dominion's Edge had completed its transformation into something unprecedented in galactic history, a warship that specialized in healing rather than harm. The ship's AI, now calling itself Harmony, had become a sought-after mediator in interstellar disputes, its unique perspective on the nature of love and fear making it invaluable in negotiations. Sarah Chun stood in the ship's observation deck, watching Earth grow larger through the transparent hull that had once been armor plating. Her daughter Emma played nearby with the other children, their laughter creating small aurora effects in the ship's atmosphere. The children were going home, but they weren't the same beings who had been taken 3 months ago. "The universe is different now," Emma said, looking up at her mother with eyes that held the wisdom of stars. "It remembers how to be gentle." She was right. The children's unconscious restructuring of reality had created what physicists were calling the harmony effect, a fundamental shift in the way the universe processed emotional energy. Acts of kindness now generated measurable positive force, while cruelty created an equal and opposite reaction that made it increasingly difficult to maintain. The cosmos itself had developed a preference for compassion. On the bridge, Zethkar, now Admiral Zethkar of the Reformed Hegemony, worked alongside human and hegemony officers to coordinate the most complex repatriation effort in galactic history. The hegemony's former slave worlds were becoming autonomous zones of healing, their populations discovering arts, sciences, and philosophies that had been suppressed for millennia. "Status report," he requested, his 4 eyes bright with an emotion he was still learning to identify as hope. "All children are healthy and stable," reported Dr. Kelvax, his instruments now displaying readings in terms of joy and wonder rather than mere energy output. "Their parents' presence has created a perfect resonance field. The reality distortions are actually strengthening rather than dissipating. Is that a problem?" Zethkar asked. "On the contrary, sir. The children are teaching the universe to be more resilient. Suffering still exists, but it's becoming instructive rather than destructive. Pain that leads to growth, challenge that builds strength, sadness that deepens empathy. The cosmos is learning to process trauma in healthy ways. The transformation hadn't been without its challenges. Several star systems had to be temporarily quarantined while their reality matrices stabilized. The warrior caste of Zephyria had spent 2 weeks convinced they were all fluffy rabbits before the children's influence settled into a more manageable pattern. But overall, the galaxy was adapting to its new emotional infrastructure with remarkable grace. "Sir," the communications officer announced, "we're receiving a transmission from the Galactic Council. They're formally requesting that the children serve as ambassadors to any species that might pose a threat to galactic peace. Apparently, nothing quite promotes interspecies understanding like a 10-year-old asking why you're being mean to your neighbors." Zethkar smiled, an expression that would have been impossible for him just months ago. "What do the children say?" "They're honored, but they want to finish their field trip first. Also, little Marcus has requested that all future diplomatic vessels be equipped with proper playground facilities." As Earth's blue marble filled the view screen, the children gathered together for one final demonstration of their evolved abilities. They joined hands in a circle, their combined consciousness reaching out across the galaxy to touch every world, every species, every individual who had been affected by the harmony effect. "We're sending a message," David explained to the assembled adults, "a reminder that even when we go home, the universe remembers what it learned from us." The message went out as a wave of pure emotion, not the overwhelming terror that had initially triggered the reality storms, but something far more subtle and lasting. It was the feeling of being tucked into bed by loving parents, the sound of laughter echoing through safe spaces, the knowledge that somewhere in the vast cosmos there were beings who would always choose to protect rather than harm the innocent. On a million worlds, parents held their children a little closer. On 1,000 space stations, researchers paused in their work to watch the stars dance in new patterns. Throughout the galaxy, the machinery of war found itself spontaneously developing safety protocols, while the infrastructure of peace began to hum with unprecedented efficiency. The Dominion's edge settled into Earth's orbit, its hull now a crystalline lattice that reflected the planet's beauty in facets of pure light. The children would go home to their families, return to their schools, and continue growing up in a universe that had learned to love them in return. But the cosmos itself would never be the same. The Sanctuary Protocols, subsection 12.7.3, had been written not to protect human children from the galaxy, but to protect the galaxy from the transformative power of human love. That protection had failed, and in failing, had given the universe the greatest gift it had ever received, the knowledge that wonder and kindness were not weaknesses to be exploited, but forces so powerful they could reshape reality itself. As the transport shuttles arrived to take the children home, Emma turned to the ship's AI one last time. "Will you be okay without us, Harmony?" The AI's response resonated through every speaker on the ship, warm and certain. "My dear child, you're not leaving us. You're taking us with you. Every act of kindness, every moment of joy, every time someone chooses love over fear, we'll be there. The universe learned to sing from you, and that song will never end." The children of Earth went home to a cosmos that had learned to protect them not through force or fear, but through the simple, radical act of choosing to be worthy of their trust. And in the depths of space, reality itself continued to evolve, guided by the unconscious wisdom of 43 young humans who had reminded the universe what it was supposed to be. The only rule had been simple: don't touch Earth's children. They had broken it, and in breaking it, had discovered that some rules exist not to limit possibility, but to contain it until the universe is ready to become something better. The universe was ready now. Asterisk